Hey guys, just thought I'd do a video going through some of the stuff we've been working on in class to try and facilitate a better standing posture, get some more thoracic extension, some more upper back extension, and just get a little bit more core awareness. Today I'm going to use, I've got a pipe, but just a rolling pin will work really nicely at home. I've got a weighted ball. If you can find something like that that's got a little bit of weight, we're going to do some diaphragmatic breathing that's going to help to facilitate some release here, and also to use it as a little bit of an abdominal release underneath. If you have like a paperweight or something like that, and then you can use the Franklin balls under there, or like a soft, a hard football that's quite small. That will work really well. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about our standing posture. Okay, so I want you to find a mirror where you can kind of see yourself in, because that's going to be really helpful for you to view where you are in space. But as we're in standing posture, we want to be drifting our weight back more towards the heel side rather than towards the toes. Okay, so we want to travel our weight back to the heels and feel like we can wiggle our toes. And then you want to feel what your knees are doing. So some of you will go into what's called a hyperextension, where the knees are kind of dropping backwards. So we want to make sure we come out of that and that we're not just like locking up the knees, okay? Equally so, I don't want to be too floppy and bent. So try and think about finding space there at the knee so you feel like your kneecap is in front of your leg bones, okay? Then we're just going to feel front and back of the pelvis. So one hand at the front, I've got the back of my hand on the back of my pelvis, and I just want you to feel that you can gently rock into your 12 and your 6, okay? So gently bringing the pelvis up through the front, and then bringing the pelvis up through the back. So you might feel your bones at the front of the hips kind of tilting upwards and tilting downwards. You might feel the sacrum feels like it slightly shortens and lengthens. But ultimately, let's try and keep the back of the legs fairly relaxed. So we don't want to be kind of bearing down into the bottom. And just kind of notice for yourself how you're rocking there. Is it easier to go forward? Is it easier to go back? Does it feel balanced in the middle? So for some of you that are a little bit more hyperextended into 6, you might need to gravitate towards 12. For some of you that are a little bit more 12, you might need to gravitate a little bit towards 6. So finding where you've got a little bit of a natural curve in your low back. So if you feel with your fingers, the vertebrae of your low back should not be kind of pushing out, okay? There should be a little bit of an inward curve in there, okay? And we're gonna put our hands at our lower abdomen once we find that neutral. And we're gonna breathe into the abdomen and then exhale to retract the abdomen back. So these are working your transverse abdominus, okay, your deep abdominal muscles. So you want to inflate the belly, the outer abdominal region, and then you want to retract the abdominals back. So the transverse abdominus. So I'm breathing into my hands, the belly's going out that way, and then your deeper muscles of your abdomen are coming in. Now watch that that doesn't pull you out of neutral, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So do several breaths. If you're breathing the other way and you're going in on the inhale, you need to recoach yourself, okay? So that we're going in and inflating, and then as you exhale, you're deflating, okay? Same thing here. So we're going to breathe into the abdomen and retract back the abdomen. This is sometimes harder. Here, we get a bit sticky. And if you're finding it hard to feel the stretch there, it might be that there's some restrictions here in your upper abdominals. So that's where I want you to take some time to release with the ball. You're going to lie on your front with the ball here. You could use a lacrosse ball. Maybe start with a Franklin ball and see how that feels, so it's a little bit softer surface. You're going right under your rib cage, okay, on either side. Don't go through the middle, but feel that you're releasing that tension on the outer layers, okay? And I would rest for at least a minute, probably 2 minutes on each side, okay? So that's if you're finding it hard to kind of inflate that upper region, okay? So we've inflated the lower, we've inflated the upper, and that should trigger when you retract your spine to go up. Okay, then we want to feel like the upper back is extending. So our thoracic spine is extending up, and we're breathing into this upper chest area. The shoulder blades go wide on your back, and the ribs should feel like they're expanding out to the side of the room. Check your weight through your heels. So there should be that low level of connection here with the ribs wide and the shoulder blades on your back, wide on your back, okay? So we don't want to be pinching the shoulder blades back and down. We want to have them wide. And also notice if you can see yourself in the mirror, are the shoulders sloped lower or are they nice and level across? So we want them having this nice level plane across, and equally so we don't want them too high. Okay, so they should feel level but without a lot of tension. So if you feel like you're just lifting your shoulders from the top, try and feel like you lift your shoulders from underneath the arms, as if someone's picking you up from underneath your armpits. Okay, so get practice doing that standing posture. Okay, now we're going to come onto all fours, and we're going to see how we come to these postures here on all fours. So decide whether you want the toes tucked. I do find the toes tucked does feel nicer for support, but if you feel you can't do that, then lay the feet flat. That's totally fine. Nice wide fingertips when we are weight bearing, and we want to feel like we're nice and spongy in the elbows, so we're not locking and hyperextending like we would do our knees. Okay, so nice soft elbows. And then I want you to feel where your shoulder blades are. So are they rounded around your back too much? Are they collapsed on your back? Are they nicely flat in the middle? This is hard to see unless you maybe have someone looking over you, but just try and get that roughly in the middle, okay? So that we're nice and flat across. Then we're gonna focus on our pelvis. We're gonna tilt the pelvis towards the 12, and you're gonna feel like you're drawing in your lower abdominal, your transverse abdominus here, and potentially here. If you have a difficulty there, then I would also focus there as well. Okay, try not to move your shoulders too much out of that nice neutral position. Then you're gonna keep the deep abdominals on, keep your transverse muscles on. As the pelvis rolls back to more of a neutral place where we started, and neutral is where the sitting bones are pointing directly behind you. You'll feel a little crease where your leg meets your pelvis. And you want to try and veer a little bit towards 6 if you can. It might feel like it's not moving very much, but we're slightly sending that tail up and going even more into hip flexion. However, we don't want to then dip into the lower back where this is sagging and we're losing control in the front, okay? So we're going to go to 12. We're going to breathe out and maybe retract the lower and the upper abdominals. And then we're slowly going to bring ourselves back through to neutral. And neutral is where those sit bones are pointing directly behind you. And it might feel like you're slightly more extended than you're used to. And I'm feeling like I've got that bend in my hips now. And then taking it a little bit further into that 6 o'clock. I think I've swallowed a hair. So slightly more into that 6 o'clock position. Now from there, so neutral if you can, 6 o'clock if you can, without losing the core and that transverse abdominis, I want you to feel like your sternum here is trying to lift towards your chin. And you're just gonna make sure the head isn't either lifting up here or retracting back too much so that the back of the neck is pushing. So I'm going to try and let my head just drop a little bit. The face is still looking down. And then I'm going to try and get my sternum to come up towards my chin. So I'm thinking a little bit here, like I'm lifting this towards my head. Now you can see that my body wants to do this. So I'm trying to lift this up and keep my head fairly relaxed here. So I can feel some muscles here rather than me being way back here, okay? And we want to do it without protruding those bottom ribs out. So the bottom ribs are in and we're lifting that sternum. You can practice by breathing into here and that'll help you get a little bit more extension. Okay, so that should feel quite hard work just to do those little movements. Once you've got that feeling and you feel pretty secure, then you're going to start to take one hand off the ground without losing that feeling. Okay, so if it feels a bit too easy, You're probably letting your body shift, which I did. So we're gonna try and keep that really steady. And I keep checking in with all three parts. Have I lost the lower abdomen? Have I lost the upper abdomen? Have I kept extending? Where's my head? 4 parts actually. Okay, so that should feel quite hard. And the third layer, you might not be here yet, the third layer is once the arm goes up, I get my shoulder blade level on my back, so I don't want to be retracting. And then I'm going to turn the trunk a little bit into rotation. I'm going to try not to turn the lower half, I'm just turning the upper half, keeping my extension through my thoracic spine, and then coming the other way, have a little moment, check all those little areas. So you want to be more towards the 6 in this pattern if you can, but without hyperextending. And then I'm going to take the other arm up, get my shoulder blade to be level on my back, and then rotate the ribs, keeping that extension. Again, you can see my head tries to do a little bit too much. Okay, and you know, 1 to 4 times, you know, 1 on each side, 3 or 4 times maximum, but I felt that just doing that. All right, so the next phase we're going to do is just getting our upper back moving a little bit more. So if you found that really difficult on all 4s and you just feel like this upper back isn't quite moving as well as you'd like it, this can be quite intense. If you're used to doing it with the roller, this is taking it to the next level, okay? We're going to be bending back over the pipe very slowly, your rolling pin, and just trying to open up any congestion in that upper back, okay? So I'm going to lie against this. This is going to feel nice and cold. Okay, so I'm just getting it kind of around the bottom of my shoulder blades, maybe a bit above that, and then taking the hands behind the head. And then I'm just going to inhale over that pipe. And when I feel like it's enough, I'm just going to exhale and move it back. You don't really need to come up very high. You almost just want to go from level, because if you go too high, your vertebrae will start kind of pushing into the pipe the other way, and that doesn't really feel that good. And then I just come up to kind of level where I was. And then I just do a little wiggle to move up a little bit higher up my back. I just want you to be conscious to keep a little bit of those deep abdominals, those transverse muscles in, so that you're not bending into that mid-back area, okay? So we're not lifting the lower back up. We're really trying to focus around this upper back, okay? So you might find a few spots there that are really sticky, really congested. Breathe into it. And take at least maybe a minute or 2 up there. Just feel how high you can go, where you're comfortable going, okay? You don't really want to go beyond really where the shoulder blades are, so kind of stay around that shoulder blade area. And then very slowly, carefully come off of that. Now I'm going to take my weighted ball. If you don't have something like this, it's totally fine. It's just something to give you a little bit of sensation into the ability to inflate and deflate your abdominal region, okay? So I'm going to start at this lower abdomen area like we were doing in standing, and we're going to inflate. Now, there's a difference between inflating and pushing out. So I don't want you to push your belly into the ball. I want you to feel like you inflate and stretch the outer layer, and then I want you to feel like you deflate and retract gently away from the ball. Now, if I retract too much, I start to fight against the ball, okay? So inhale, inflate. Exhale, deflate, and gently retract. So feeling those deeper abdominal muscles just activate. Now we've got to be careful then we don't kind of push the back into the mat so that the pressure is there, okay? So I'm keeping a very neutral spine. Okay, so we can do as many breaths as you like there. This is also really good for calming the system down and to get more of our parasympathetic state rather than being in the fight or flight state. Then I'm going to go just underneath the ribs. Notice how I'm going till there's silence. So breathing in and breathing out until the ball sinks right down. You might even feel your pulse. You can practice this as long as you want. If you do find that you're someone that's very stressed, this is a very calming exercise to do, even if you just have your hands there. And you inflate and then you deflate. But having that ball there will help to stretch your outer muscles. Okay? So now we've inflated, deflated. Now I want you to inflate as you roll down your pelvis towards 6. Now, my inner layers are still on, so I'm not just letting go. I'm trying to stretch the outer wall of my abdominals. I feel a little bit here that this is shortening, but I'm not hyperextending, so I'm not really lifting that low back. I'm lengthening the front. And then exhale towards 12. And just feeling that deflation, that retraction of the abdomen. So I'm keeping a little bit of those inner layers on as I roll down. You can feel a little bit in your feet like they're pulling to your seat. And then exhale to roll back into the 12, deflating. Inhale to roll. So you don't want to let go, right? We want to keep those in, and equally so we're not pushing the belly out. So it's just a feeling of expanding and then melting. And then feel where your neutral is. So feel where you can rest. And it should be that you're resting kind of on the sacrum. So it shouldn't really be that you're resting on the tail, because that would be that you are too hyperextended, okay? But equally so, we don't want to be jamming into the floor. So I want you to see if you can keep your pelvis really steady, legs in line with the hips, keeping no movement in the pelvic bowl at all as you float one leg towards tabletop and then come back down. Now I'm noticing if this upper region is flaring a little bit, and if it is, give it a little bit of retraction. And if you notice that the pelvis gets pulled over to one side, try and bring it back to the middle, okay? Try to resist just lifting your leg if the pelvis moves. Try and see if you can be really strict with keeping that pelvis very, very still. Trying not to overdo my chin dropping down. And also notice your shoulder blades on the mat. How are they resting on the floor? Okay, are they still in that wide position on the mat? So I'm just slowly letting one leg at a time come to tabletop, and I'm trying to resist any twists or shifts in the pelvis, okay? Now if you can manage this, and you might not be ready yet, so don't push yourself to this next level if you can't connect with this. I'm going to let this leg come up and drop into my hip. And then I'm going to deflate and feel those deep abdominals supporting me to lift the second leg up. So again, there should be no movement in the pelvis, in the spine, in the shoulders, and then no movement as the leg comes down. You might want that breath out, and no movement as the second leg comes down. Inhale. I like to deflate to float that first leg up. Take a pause, and then deflate again. Really feeling those deep abdominals working First leg goes down. Try not to move the pelvis or to feel like you're pushing out and bracing. Okay, so it should feel very deep connection to your transverse muscles. So do that a couple times till you feel you've balanced yourself out, you've done enough on each side. So use your breath as you need to. Okay, so nothing should have moved from that central place. So if you're coming down and then you're going, oh, then maybe you were too tucked. Yeah, if you twisted it all, then maybe you were rotating. Now I'm using a little box here, but if you use a little stool or something like that, nothing too high, maybe your couch without your cushions might be suitable. We're gonna try a long leg bridge, okay? So instead of doing a straight bent leg bridge, we're gonna try and activate our glutes in this context, which is a bit more functional for our day-to-day life, okay? So what I like to do is go a little bit towards 6 o'clock with your pelvis, okay? So we're not gonna be too tucked under, and maybe I went a little bit too far with that. So I've gotta be careful when I go into 6 that it's not coming from my back lifting up, okay? So I'm gonna tilt the pelvis, and then you're gonna press into your bench. Notice how my heels are lifted, okay? Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to take my socks off so you can see a little bit more in the next one. And then as I come up, some of you will be able to stay more neutral. Some of you will need to go into a little bit of 12 partway up to feel the back of the legs. Okay, so you want to feel from the cheeks to the hamstrings and that you're not over lifting through your low back. Okay, your transverse abdominus is on, and then you're pressing the box down and then releasing straight back down. So not really much articulation at all. We've got to just be careful with articulating because sometimes we're doing too much thoracic flexion, okay? So we want to be wide with our shoulder blades. We're going to go towards 6 o'clock with the pelvis, and then we're going to press into the box, go towards neutral, maybe slightly 12, just play. If the 12 blocks the feeling in the back of the legs, then stay more neutral or slightly 6. Check your ribs, check your lower abdomen. So I can really feel my glutes and my hamstrings kind of running right down the back of the legs and then release back down. Always feel free to kind of wiggle and adjust as you do this. You can play with your arms up. If you feel like your shoulder blades are kind of bracing into the floor, then maybe play with the shoulder blades wider. Just want to make sure they're flat on the mat and they're not over rounding or squeezing back too far. So this really helps me. Now I feel much more glutes and hamstrings now. I'm just checking how my pelvis is. If I go more 12, what does that do? If I stay neutral, what does that do? If I go 6, 6 is too much, so neutral is good. What 6 did made me go into my back. If I went too much 12, I started squeezing into my glutes too much, okay? I'm gonna do just one more because this is hard. So I start a little bit 6. For me, I need to just come to a little bit of 12 to get me neutral. Check my shoulder blades. Super hard. Doesn't look hard, but very taxing along the back of the legs. Okay, we're gonna do 2 more things. One that focuses in on your thoracic spine. If you are very rounded in your upper back, then I want you to put a ball at your chest so that your upper back can round over the ball during this one. Not a ball like this, but a soft Pilates ball, okay? And if you can and you're fairly neutral, then you want to go on the floor here to work our upper back. So wiggle your legs down the mat and just kind of notice the curve in your spine. Okay, if there's a big inward curve, then we might want to do a little bit of 12 with the pelvis. If you're fairly neutral, like I am through the low back, then I also check that my ribs are in the right place, that my ribs aren't kind of slamming into the floor before I start this exercise. Okay. So we're going to breathe into our abdomen like we did on our back. And then I'm going to retract away from the floor gently through my lower transverse and my upper transverse. Now I don't want to go so much that it starts to round the back, okay? So the back should stay fairly still when you're doing this. But it's just to prepare. Now keeping that on, I want you to expand your ribs. So just feel this feeling of a light widening through your rib cage, and feel that sternum piece lifting towards your chin. Now I've lost my lower abdomen and I've lost my upper, and then I'm just going to move very slowly. I'm going to check my head. So is the head pushing backwards too much? Let it drop, and then feel that sternum going to your chin. So it doesn't need to be a very big movement, but this is really going to work your thoracic spine. You might have to draw your shoulder blades into more of a flat position on your back. You may have to widen them apart. So if they're squeezing too far back, you need to widen them apart. If they're too rounded, you need to move them towards each other a little bit, okay? But they should be flat on your back, and then come back down. So inhale into the belly. Exhale, retract the navel in. You might even want to inhale to breathe into that chest area. Widen the ribs out, and then you might want to exhale to lengthen just a little bit more. You can play with the hand positions a little bit. So you can play with your arms being in front and how that feels. Working into that upper back. So we're trying to extend the upper back without dropping those lower ribs and going into then hyperextension in the low back. We're trying to avoid the chin just lifting, okay? So the chin and the eyes look down, and then the chest is going towards the chin. We're also checking the shoulder blades. Are they staying nice and wide on your back? And it might not feel like you're doing a lot of movement, but we're really trying to tap in to that upper back movement, okay? So lots going on there. Play with arms, maybe having them here. That's if you need more retraction in your shoulder blades, but actually I do that a little bit too much, and then I don't move my thoracic spine very well, okay? So if you need that ball to help facilitate the feeling of going over and then coming to neutral, that's great. Okay, our last little section is trying to come into a plank. So there's two ways you can come into it. You can come into it from all fours, go into your 12, then find your neutral zone where you still have the transverse abdominus on. Then you're going to walk down, and get into that plank position. You might have to adjust then where you are so that you're more neutral with your pelvis. Some of you will need to be more 12. Would you see that pushes my back too much? So I need to be more neutral with my lower abdominals engaged. I need my bottom ribs to be engaged. And then just what we did on the floor, that little bit of sternum towards chin, the chest expanding wide, the shoulder blades flat on the back. And if that isn't burning in your abdominal region, something isn't in the right position. So either your tail has started to come up too high, you've lost your lower ribs, or your shoulders aren't quite in position, or we're not extending that upper back. Check the head. And hold for a couple seconds and then come out of the position. And I would suggest doing 3 to 5. Okay, if you're doing it really well, you shouldn't have to do a lot of them. The other way you can come into the position is already from the floor, and then you can get the upper back into position. And then you can tuck your toes and let the pelvis then come up into position. This is hard, but works a little bit better for me. I really get the upper back in the right place. Hopefully it looks okay. Check my pelvis. I don't want to be too 12 that it pulls me into lumbar flexion. but I don't want to be too dropped either. Lower abdomen working, I'm shaking. Watch my head. And then release. And then just take a moment to kind of come back to your standing posture and feel what it feels like now. So we've woken up some deep core muscles. We've tried to tap into a little bit of that upper back extension. So see how you are in standing. Are we back on our heels? Do we feel that lower abdomen and upper abdomen retract? Do we feel like we can breathe into that sternum? And the shoulders nice and wide on the back. The thoracic spine extended. Are our shoulders level? Are they drooped? Or they feel a little bit more elevated now? Amazing. Hope that really helps you to get more richness in your standing posture.